I never thought a simple text message could change my entire life. I was exhausted. Work had drained me, and all I wanted was to collapse onto my couch, maybe throw on a mindless show and zone out for the night. But then my phone buzzed. Uncle Ray. That was unusual. We talked, sure, but he never randomly texted, let alone something cryptic. The message was short, only a few words, but they made my stomach tighten. You need to see this. I'm sorry. My thumb hovered over the video attachment. Something inside me told me that whatever I was about to watch, I wouldn't like it. Still, I tapped. The screen lit up, and suddenly I was somewhere else. My parents' backyard, a weekend barbecue, familiar voices, familiar faces, and there, right in the center of it all, lounging back in a chair like she owned the world, Amber, my sister. She held a drink in her hand, laughing, surrounded by friends and family. She looked relaxed, confident, too confident. And then she spoke. I mean, come on, she said, rolling her eyes dramatically. She actually thinks I'm struggling? Please. Laughter, not just hers. My cousin Matt, her friend Lindsay, even my dad chuckled. Amber took a sip of her drink and leaned back, smirking. I make more money than she even knows. Why would I waste it when my idiot sister lets me stay rent-free? The laughter got louder. Someone whistled, someone clapped. My stomach twisted. She wasn't done. I swear Allie is so stupid. She just lets me live there for free, cooks for me, cleans up after me, and she actually thinks I need her help? It's pathetic. She laughed again, a deep, amused laugh shaking her head. Like, why would I ever leave when I can just keep playing her forever? Something inside me snapped. I rewound it, watched it again and again. The words repeated, but the pain hit fresh each time. She had been living in my house for 3 years. 3. I had given her everything. Food, a room, no rent, no bills. Because she had told me she needed me. She had cried to me on the phone, sobbing about how she had nowhere to go. She had looked me in the eyes and promised, it's only temporary. I just need time to get back on my feet. Lies. Every single word had been a lie. The worst part wasn't even what she said. It was how proud she was of it. She wasn't just using me, she was bragging about it. She thought she was smart, thought she was winning. She had no idea what was coming. Uncle Ray's message popped up again. I wasn't sure if I should send this, but you needed to know. I hovered over the keyboard. My first instinct was to confront her, storm into her room, shove the phone in her face, and demand an explanation. But then I paused. That would be too easy. Amber thrived on drama. She would cry, make excuses, twist things until somehow I was the villain. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to make her regret ever thinking she could play me. I typed back to Uncle Ray. Thank you. Don't say anything to her. I'll handle it. And I would. The next morning, I acted like nothing had changed. Amber waltzed into the kitchen, stretching dramatically. Morning, she said, yawning. Morning, I replied, stirring my coffee. She had no idea I had spent the entire night making plans. She moved around the kitchen like she owned the place. She grabbed my oat milk, poured herself coffee, and hummed as she scrolled through her phone. 3 years. 3 years of this. 3 years of me making space for her, me bending over backward, me letting her take and take without question. And she had laughed about it. Ugh, work is insane right now, she sighed. If my boss emails me one more time, I might lose it. I smiled, because I remembered what she had said in the video. I make way more than she even knows. She had the money. She had the means to leave. But she chose to lie, to manipulate, to stay for free because she thought I was too stupid to notice. Not anymore. I took a slow sip of coffee. So, I said casually, what are your plans this month? Amber frowned. What do you mean? Oh, you know, I shrugged. You've been here a while. Figured you might be looking for a place of your own soon. She groaned. Allie, I have way too much going on right now. Moving is the last thing I need to deal with. Plus, it's so expensive. I fought the urge to laugh. Expensive? She could afford it. But I kept my expression neutral. I get that, I said. But, I was thinking, it's probably time for some changes around here. Amber barely looked up from her phone. What kind of changes? I let the silence stretch. Then, with the same casual tone, I said, starting next month, I think it makes sense for you to start paying rent. She froze, just for a second, Then she laughed. Wait, are you serious? I tilted my head. Yeah, you've been here 3 years, Amber, rent-free. I figured it was time. Her whole demeanor changed. She scoffed. Come on, Allie. We're family. You really expect me to pay rent? I held my coffee just beneath my lips, watching her. Yes. The word landed like a slap. Amber leaned back in her chair, twisting her face into mock disbelief. Wow. Okay. I just wasn't expecting you to pull something like this. Something like what? I asked, voice calm. She shook her head, laughing under her breath. You're seriously going to start treating me like some random tenant? I didn't flinch. You're living here like a tenant. Why shouldn't you pay like one? Her nostrils flared. I could see the gears turning in her head, scrambling to twist the situation, to guilt-trip me, to find any way to get out of it. Then, like clockwork, she sighed dramatically, switching tactics. Look, she said, softening her voice, I know I joke around a lot. Maybe I don't always show it, but I appreciate you, okay? I said nothing. She pressed on. I've just been going through a lot, you know? Work stress, personal stuff. I don't talk about it much because I don't want to burden you. I let the silence hang. Then I said, So you have the money then? Amber blinked. What? You just said it's not a financial problem, I said, taking another sip. So paying rent shouldn't be an issue. Her face twitched, and in that moment, I knew. She was screwed. Amber spent the next few days pretending like our conversation never happened. She didn't bring up the rent again, didn't acknowledge the shift in power. She moved around the house the same way she always had, carefree, entitled, acting like everything still belonged to her. But something had changed. I saw it. The way she avoided eye contact when we crossed paths in the kitchen. The way she no longer sprawled out on the couch like she owned it. The way her phone calls with friends were quieter, more tense. She thought if she ignored it long enough, I'd drop it. She thought she still had control. She was wrong. The first of the month arrived. Amber didn't say a word, didn't ask any questions. She walked into the kitchen that morning like she didn't have a single worry in the world. She poured herself a cup of coffee from my groceries, grabbed one of my expensive protein bars, and collapsed onto the couch, scrolling through her phone, completely unbothered. I sipped my coffee, watching her. She thought I had backed down. She thought she had won. Then her phone buzzed. I saw the exact moment everything fell apart. Her eyebrows pinched together as she glanced at the screen. She tapped a few times, then suddenly sat up, her entire posture shifting from relaxed to rigid. Her fingers moved faster, scrolling until finally... What the hell? She muttered under her breath. She turned her phone toward me, eyebrows raised. Allie, I just got an email from your rental management company. What the hell is this? I set my coffee down. That's your lease agreement. Amber blinked, twice. My what? Your lease agreement, I repeated, calm as ever. Since you refused to pay me, I hired a property management company. Rent is officially due, today. She stared at me like I had just spoken another language. Then she laughed. Oh, you're joking. Nope. She scrolled through the email again, her expression shifting from disbelief to something colder. This says my first rent payment is due today. That's right, I nodded. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her breathing was heavier now, her fingers clenching around the phone as she scanned the email again, trying to find some kind of loophole, some escape route. But there wasn't one. I had closed every door. You actually did this? She asked, her voice quieter now. Yes, Amber. I did. She stood up fast, too fast, nearly knocking over her coffee. You're insane. I raised an eyebrow. No, Amber, I'm just done being played. Her jaw tightened, her nostrils flaring. For the first time ever, she looked like she was losing control. I waited. I knew what was coming next. Amber had a pattern. She wasn't used to losing. She wasn't used to being told no. And just like clockwork, she launched into phase 2, the meltdown. It started with denial. You can't do this to me. Then the guilt trip. We're family. You're really going to treat me like some random tenant? Then the excuses. I don't have the money for this right now. And finally, the manipulation. You don't even need the rent, Allie. You're fine without it. You're just doing this to punish me. I let her spiral. Let her throw out every excuse, every lie, every attempt to worm her way out of this. Then, once she was done, I leaned back in my chair, completely unfazed. No, Amber, I said, my voice steady. I'm doing this because it's fair, because you lied, because you laughed at me behind my back, because you called me an idiot while taking advantage of my kindness. And I let you, for 3 years, but not anymore. Amber's mouth opened, then snapped shut. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me. And maybe she didn't, because this wasn't the same sister she had manipulated for years. This wasn't the pushover. This wasn't the fool. This was someone she couldn't control anymore. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "And what if I don't pay?" she asked, voice low. I smiled. "Then you have 14 days to vacate the property. If you're still here after that, I file for eviction." Amber's eyes widened. "You would actually evict me?" "Yes." She let out a sharp, bitter laugh, pacing back and forth now. Wow, you've really changed, huh?" I shrugged. Maybe, or maybe I just woke up. Silence. Amber's breathing was uneven, her hands shaking slightly as she processed what was happening. Then she exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "I'm going out," she snapped, grabbing her bag. "Take your time," I said cheerfully. "But just a heads up, if you don't pay by the end of the day, that 14-day notice will be delivered first thing tomorrow morning." Amber didn't respond. She just slammed the door behind her. And I smiled, because for the first time in 3 years, I was finally in control. 3 days. That's how long she was gone. No calls, no texts, no explanations, just silence. It didn't surprise me. Running away was classic Amber. Whenever things got difficult, whenever she was forced to face the consequences of her own actions, she vanished. She was waiting for me to break first. She thought I'd get nervous, thought I'd second-guess myself, thought I'd be lying awake at night, worrying, wondering if I'd been too harsh, if maybe, just maybe, I should let her stay after all. She thought she still had me wrapped around her finger. She was wrong. I didn't chase after her. I didn't call, didn't ask where she was, didn't send a single message. Because I knew she wasn't struggling. She wasn't homeless. She wasn't sitting in a gutter, wondering where she'd sleep. She had options, plenty of them. She just didn't like them. Amber had spent 3 years living off me, rent-free, bill-free, stress-free. And now, for the first time, she was being told to stand on her own 2 feet. She hated it, and that's why she was stalling. She didn't want to leave. She just didn't want to pay. But she had no choice. The eviction paperwork was filed. The countdown had started, and every single day she stayed silent was another day closer to the moment she'd lose everything. So I waited, and then, at exactly 11:47 p.m. on the 3rd night, I heard it. The soft creak of the front door. She was back. I sat on the couch, scrolling through my phone, pretending not to notice as she slipped inside. But I saw her. The way she hesitated in the doorway. The way she lingered there, like she was trying to decide if she even wanted to go through with this. The way her hands curled into fists before she finally stepped forward, kicking off her shoes with more force than necessary. She was angry at me, at the situation, at the fact that I hadn't come crawling after her, begging her to stay. She dumped her purse on the counter, exhaling sharply. Then she turned to me. "We need to talk." I closed my phone, slowly looking up. "I'm listening." Amber folded her arms, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. "You really filed the eviction?" I didn't blink. "Yes?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You're seriously doing this?" "Yes." She let out a dry laugh, shaking her head. "Jesus, Allie, you're actually kicking me out." "I gave you a choice, Amber. You just didn't like it." Her jaw tightened. "You didn't even try to talk to me first." I tilted my head. "Funny, I seem to remember you walking out mid-conversation." She froze. Then she exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair. "I was figuring things out." "No, Amber," I said evenly. "You were hiding. You were waiting for me to cave." She didn't deny it. Instead, she switched tactics. Her voice softened. "Look," she said, stepping closer. "I messed up, okay? I shouldn't have said what I said. I was just venting. I didn't mean any of it." I laughed, a slow, humorless sound. "Yes, you did." Amber hesitated. "No, You called me an idiot, Amber. You laughed about how I was too dumb to ever kick you out. You bragged about playing me for a fool." Her shoulders stiffened. "I was just talking." "I heard it," I cut in. "I watched you say it." "And so did Uncle Ray." Her head snapped up. Her eyes were wide. "You told him?" she whispered. I smirked. "No, Amber, he told me." Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She was caught, exposed, and worst of all, she couldn't lie her way out of it. Amber exhaled sharply, pacing in frustration. Okay, I get it. I screwed up." She stopped, looking at me with something that almost resembled fear. "But I don't have anywhere to go, Allie." She stared at me, waiting for me to break, waiting for me to sigh and say, "Fine, you can stay." But I didn't. Instead, I picked up my laptop, pulled up an email, and turned the screen toward her. "Actually," I said, scrolling, "that's not true." Amber frowned. "What?" "I took the liberty of looking into some affordable apartments nearby," I said, clicking on one of the listings. "There are 3 places within 10 miles that fit your budget. I even spoke to a landlord. He's willing to waive the security deposit if you apply this week." Amber's jaw tightened. "I can't believe you did that." I shrugged. "Why wouldn't I? You have a job. You make good money. Remember?" She scoffed, shaking her head. "You're actually enjoying this, aren't you?" I met her gaze, my voice calm. "No, Amber, but I am done being used." She took a sharp breath, but she didn't argue, because she couldn't. She knew I was right. I had given her every chance. I had treated her with kindness, with patience. I had offered her options, and in the end, she had made her choice. Amber let out a bitter chuckle, shaking her head. "Wow, so this is really happening?" I nodded. "It is." She glanced toward the hallway, toward her bedroom, toward the place she had treated like her own for years. But it wasn't hers. It never had been. She turned back to me, jaw clenched. "Fine," she muttered. "I'll be out by the end of the week." I gave her a small, knowing smile. "Good." And just like that, the power shifted. For the first time in years, I wasn't the fool. I wasn't the pushover. I was free. Amber moved out 3 days later. No dramatic speech, no last-minute tears, no apology. She barely spoke. She packed her things in silence, shoving clothes into bags, stuffing her makeup into boxes, moving through the house with stiff, jerky motions. I watched from the doorway, arms crossed, as she stripped the room of all traces of herself. And for the first time since she moved in, I felt something strange. Relief. I had spent 3 years feeling like a guest in my own home. 3 years of missing groceries, 3 years of tiptoeing around messes I didn't make, 3 years of letting her take and take and take, without question, without limits. Now, it was finally ending. She zipped up her final suitcase, yanked it off the bed, and turned toward me. Her expression was unreadable. "That's it," she muttered. I nodded. "Looks like it." She hesitated, like she wanted to say something, like there was a part of her that still expected me to break first. But I didn't. I waited. And when she realized I wasn't going to beg her to stay, wasn't going to cave, her mouth pressed into a thin line and she rolled her suitcase past me without another word. The door closed, and just like that, she was gone. An hour later, my phone buzzed. "I'm out. Good luck, Allie." I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I locked my phone. I wasn't angry. I wasn't relieved. I just felt done. I walked through the house, my fingers trailing along the walls, the furniture, the counters, touching everything I had spent years sharing with someone who never appreciated it. And now, for the first time, it was mine again. No more disappearing food, no more mystery stains, no more walking into my own kitchen to find someone else's mess waiting for me. Just silence. And I hadn't realized how much I missed it. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. When I opened it, Uncle Ray was standing there, hands in his pockets, a small smirk on his face. "So," he said, "how's it feel?" I let out a slow breath. "Peaceful," he chuckled. "I bet." He stepped inside, glancing around the house, nodding in approval. "Looks better already." I laughed. "I think so too." Ray studied me for a moment, his smirk fading into something softer. "You know," he said, "I know that wasn't easy. But you did the right thing." I sighed, leaning against the counter. "Then why does it still feel weird?" Ray folded his arms. "Because she's your sister." I nodded. "Yeah." "But that doesn't mean she was good for you." I exhaled. I had spent so long convincing myself that I had to keep putting up with it because we were family. that no matter how much she took advantage of me, no matter how much she disrespected me, I had to let it slide. Because that's what family does, right? But Ray was right. Family or not, she wasn't good for me, and I didn't owe her anything. "Do you think she'll be okay?" I asked. Ray let out a slow breath. "She'll have to be." And I knew he was right. Amber had finally been forced to grow up. She had been forced to take responsibility for herself, for her life, for the choices she made. Whether she liked it or not, she couldn't rely on me anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that was the best thing that could have happened to her. That night, I sat on the couch with a glass of wine, staring out the window at the quiet street beyond. For the first time in a long, long time, I felt something I hadn't even realized I was missing: freedom. I had spent years letting someone else take up space in my life, in my home, in my peace. I had given and given and given, and received nothing in return. And now I was free. I smiled, taking a slow sip of wine. Amber had laughed about playing me for a fool. She had underestimated me. And now, she was learning the hard way, because I had finally stopped playing the fool.